This conference will now be recorded.
Hey guys, it's Rich Lehman again, the endurance coach for Athletics Nova Scotia and the head coach of the Dalhousie cross country and track teams, as well as Halifax Athletics cross country and track. Uh, as I mentioned last week, the hope is to get something out a week to help sort of bridge the gap between where we are now and where we'll be when we come out of the this COVID-19 situation, whether we have an outdoor season or not. Wanted to try to get some professional development available for coaches and information for athletes if anybody's interested. So today I wanted to do something a little bit different than what we typically do. I think we spend a lot of time as coach developers and learning facilitators talking about theories, talking about sort of ways that we could do stuff, and vaguely talking about some of the things that we actually do. But I wanted to take an opportunity to actually go through a full season sort of in review, and show not necessarily what like what we did last week with the periodization stuff, what you know what we do, but actually what we did, if that makes any sense. Uh, so what we're looking at here is the 2019 Dal men's cross country team season. I think we're gonna be in this self isolation situation for long enough that down the road I'd like to look at the women's cross country program as well from 2019, and then both teams maybe in the track season as well as some other things. But uh, today I wanted to focus on the men's group, and just sort of go through, from the day we met at training camp in August, right up until the AUS championships. I say right up until the AUS championships for a couple reasons. Number one, I mean personally, uh, the AUS championships were on October 26th, and then U Sports were 2 weeks later. And my son was born on October 31st. So believe it or not, my notes are a little spotty from that 2 week period between the two championships. And then number two was probably late July when I started really getting into the periodizing and sort of programming for the cross country season that was coming. At that point, we were looking at one big chunk of training leading up until the U Sports Championships, and what you'll see from the results from the first meet. Basically, as soon as we got a look at how good that St. FX team was and how good of a job Eric Gillis was doing there, we kind of moved the goalposts a little bit and realized that we were going to have to have a pretty significant peak for the AUS championships just to get the opportunity to go to the U Sports championships. So things changed a little bit at that point. So this will go right up until the AUS championships, and then I'll touch very briefly on U Sports after that. So we started our training camp. Would have been, it was August 26th we left. And this is the roster that we had. Not everybody was at camp. Our training camp is always optional. It's we want everybody back on campus for obviously the first day of classes, but we never make our training camps mandatory because for the most part these athletes are working summer jobs to pay for school. So I'm not going to ask them to give up. Not going to tell them to give up the last 10 days of work so that they can come and get a few extra training sessions in. So the roster that we were working with, I'm going to briefly touch on each of them. It's just alphabetical here, but Will Cox, he was a first year, just finished up his rookie year. We had a very good recruiting year last year, so we had some solid rookies in this year. Will was one of them. He was 11th at the Officer Cross Country Championships and was a bronze medalist in the the steeplechase both at OFSA and the junior national championships. So he was pretty polished, and we were expecting him to contribute right away. James Cromack, he was actually our reigning MVP. He had been our top runner all year last year in 2018. He was an 8:32 3K runner. He was coming off of a summer of basically no running. He was dealing with an Achilles injury that, as you'll see, actually lasted well into this year, and he didn't end up competing at all, whether in cross country or track. But we're talking about what we did, and on August 27th, we thought we were going to have James. Callum Drever, he's in 5th year. He had just come off of a summer where he had run 14:46 for 5K, which was a big PB for him. He also ran, I think, 3:57 for 1500, which was his first time getting under 4 minutes. So he was coming off a pretty big outdoor season. Alec Freeman, he was a senior as well, graduating in a month or so. He came from a soccer background, and just over the course of 4 years, just slowly chipped away and moved his way up on our roster. And again, as you'll see, he when he started with us, he was our 13th, 14th, 15th guy on teams that were much worse than this team, and I think he was as good as our 8th or 9th at points this year. So just a story of hard work and not really being willing to take no for an answer. Jonathan Goodridge, who's a transfer from Guelph, 354, 154 guy, 2nd year eligibility, and we were very excited to get him. Aiden Goslett, another rookie, who's just he was a sub 4 1500 runner coming out of high school. Hudson Grimshaw Surratt, any of the this is mostly a Nova Scotia group, being provided by Athletics Nova Scotia. I think everybody knows who Hudson is. Harmon is Hudson's little brother, and he's also a sub 2 800 meter runner, and he's run on our 4x8 at the conference championships, and he's a great team guy. Jacob Holleran, he is from Guysborough, another story of just sort of spending years just chipping away and getting himself into the thick of things on our team. He probably got about 4 minutes better over 8K in the last few years, and he definitely outworks. I would argue that he probably outworks anybody in the conference. He definitely outworks anybody on our team, and if we had a team full of guys that could hurt like Jacob, we'd be in a pretty good spot nationally, let alone at the conference level. Trent Lyons, he was the AOS Rookie of the Year a couple of years ago. He's been a scoring member for our cross country team before. Just a really good, solid cross country runner. Blair Miller, a 9-minute 3K runner indoors, who's been with us for 4 years. I worked with him as well at Halifax, so we've been together for a few years. Nick Robertson was a transfer from UPEI, who I'd be lying if I told you a year ago I knew the potential that this guy has. I didn't really get to see it until training camp, really. But super talented athlete, and we're very excited for the next 4 years with him. Mike Rogers, 5th-year athlete who always finds a way to help out when it matters most, and sub 230,000 meter runner, so he can get going on the track as well. But you could tell at training camp that cross country was really his focus this year. And Daniel Rosen is the third of the 3 rookies that we brought in. He was also top 20. He was 18th at the OFSA cross country championships, finalist in the 3K and the steeplechase at the OFSA championships as well. So strength of our team, just going through the roster there, I think you get a pretty good idea of the depth that we had. We knew around this time last year when we had those commitments from those 3 rookies, and then the transfers with Goodridge and Robertson, that our depth was going to be very, very good. We knew we were going to be very strong through at least 9. We didn't know we were going to be as strong as we were all the way down to 13, but the depth, we knew that we were going to be the deepest team in the conference. probably by quite a bit. Energy was awesome. It was a very young group. They, as I said, 3 rookies, 2 transfers in their second year. Hudson and James were in their third year, and the two fifth years in Callum and Mike in some ways act like first years. So we had a fair amount of energy on this team, and you could tell right from the beginning that they were gonna get along, they were gonna run well together, and that they were excited to see what would happen this year and moving forward. Leadership, this was probably the best leadership group that I've had at Dal since I've been here. Not only did we have those 2 5th years I was talking about in Callum and Mike with a ton of experience. They've been through it for 5 years. We're our captains. The way we do it at Dal is I select the one captain and then the team selects the other one. Going into training camp, I announced that Hudson Grimshaw Surrett was going to be the coach's selection, and the team voted for Jacob Holleran. And those two, they're both very good leaders in their own right, but the way they work together is pretty incredible. I mean, Hudson is kind of the lead by example kind of guy. He runs with emotion. He trains with emotion. He's not afraid to put people in their place, whether it's people on the team or even myself or other people on the coaching staff. He'll always step in and say what he's thinking. And Jacob is just a little bit more even keel. He just puts work in. No one day is that important to him. He just wakes up every day, gets the job done, goes to bed and repeats the next day. He's a super compassionate guy. He's a great offset to sort of that in your face energy that Hudson can bring to being a leader. And we also had buy-in right from training camp. We had a team meeting at the very beginning, and one of my assistant coaches, Evan Bezanson, he said to me afterwards that when I was talking, he was looking around the room, and the buy-in that we were getting from these guys was we haven't seen that at Dal on the men's side since we've been around. So they fully believe what we were trying to sell them, which is very important because anybody who's done any coaching courses with me knows how I feel about programming and coaching in our sport. For the most part, I believe that most of us as coaches are doing the same stuff. It's not that complicated. It's running. We're not setting plays. We're not picking lineups, that kind of thing. We're literally just training. And I think that most programs will work. There's very few training protocols that I've seen that I've just been like, oh, there's no way that's going to work. Most things work, but they only work if the athlete buys in. And what we got, the buy-in that we got from this team, in my opinion and in my experience, is been unprecedented. Some growth areas for us. We didn't have a low stick, so just for what that means in cross country, a low stick is either one or two people who are running for the medals. They're running for at the national level it might be a top 10 athlete, but it's literally a low number. It's the stick is the popsicle sticks that they hand out at the end of cross country races. It's just a term used for a guy who is going to score very few points for your team, which is good because the fewer points scored, the better your team is. So we didn't. We've got some very solid cross country runners, but we knew going in that we were going to struggle to put our top runner ahead of St. Mary's top runner. We knew we were going to struggle to put him ahead of X's top runner, Memorial's top runner, UMB. Like all of these teams have one or two guys that anyone on our team is going to really struggle to beat. So we knew we weren't going to have the first or second or third guy across the line. So not having a low stick is a concern going into the year. Lack of experience, what I talked about energy earlier, that was, that's basically saying we were a youthful team. And then the flip side of that is, we had some guys, as I said, Mike and Callum, who've done this 5 times, but we knew we were going to be putting a lot of guys on the line who haven't haven't really been through this. And then the people that have been through it, so the veterans on our team, have more of a track focus. So they were coming off outdoor seasons. I mean, Hudson's an 800-meter runner. John is an 800 1500-meter runner. Callum is a longer distance guy, but he's a lot more comfortable on the track. Like, as I said, he was a 5,000-meter runner all summer, which does translate quite well to cross country. But we, track is a huge focus for most of the veterans in that group. So, we knew we were going up against, in Santa FX and UNB, 2 teams that really, really value cross country and spend a good chunk of their summer, if not the entire summer, preparing for the fall. So we knew there's a bit of an uphill battle in that regard. So keys to winning at the conference level for us, we needed a small 1-7 spread. Very briefly, I will touch on what that means. Obviously, lower score wins, and the points that you are assigned correspond to the place that you were. So if you were third, you score 3 points. 5, you're allowed to put 7 people on the line at the conference championships. 5 score, and your 6, 7 are displacers. So, we knew that without that low stick, we were going to need our all 7 of our guys to be, ahead of some of the 4th and 5th runners of some of the other teams in order to win the meet. So what we wanted to focus on all year was just getting as small of a time spread between our 1st and our 7th runner. Once you have that, assuming you're running fast, you're laughing. That's a good way to win cross country races, as long as your whole group is far enough up the pack for that spread to actually matter. Increased mental toughness. We have some very talented guys, and we have some guys who have been able to demonstrate some serious toughness on the track, but cross country toughness is a completely different world. And a couple of things that we had to really focus on were, the ability to get out and hit the halfway mark, sort of be 4 or 5K into a race, and already feeling basically as bad as you're going to feel 3K later, and you've got 10, 15 minutes of running left, and you're already, deep in a hole, and being able to just sort of exist in that deep, dark place and not back off. 99.9% of the time, when people slow down in cross country, it's not a physiological thing. Their bodies are physically capable of maintaining the pace that they've been running. They just, that little bit of fear, a little bit of doubt, and they back off. And we had seen a fair amount of that in our group, and we knew that we had to address that. And then a team first mentality. Again, we knew that the low sticks on some of the other teams that we were running against were probably a little bit more polished, a little bit more consistently very good than we were. And, we have a couple guys that, if we weren't thinking team first, probably, once we get to the US championships, they maybe try to do something individually. They try to get out with that group, with that lead group, and sneak into the individual medals or be a conference all-star or something like that. And, we knew that as the season went on, we knew that we were going to have to let some of that stuff go, and run as a team and run within ourselves if we wanted to win. So, I think we had to foster that mentality in that group, that we're valuing a team title over any individual success, and we're going to race that way. So here's the plan, and this sort of ties into what we talked about last week with periodization and writing YTPs. We had a 9-week cycle. from the first day of training camp up until the AUS championships. So obviously that breaks up very nicely 3 mesocycles, 3 microcycles per meso. So basically we just broke it up into 3 3-week sections. You know, as I said last week, it's pretty common for microcycles at this level to be 7 days long because everything else that the student athlete is dealing with is in a 7-day cycle. So it's really the only way we can schedule for a full group of athletes. Easy runs on Monday, Wednesday, off day on Friday. We had quality sessions on Tuesday and Saturday. And then on Thursday, we had drills, strides. You know, one of our assistant coaches, Evan, runs a sort of a technical session at Goresbrook Field on Thursdays, and we leave off. We go from there into an easy run as a group, and then our long runs are on Sunday. We're going to actually go through every microcycle in depth from the whole season, because that's the whole point here is not just talking about theories of training, actually showing you what we actually did. And where we can, I will also talk about what the plan was and where we adapted. What I'm not going to talk too much about is the easy runs and long runs. Those are individual. They're individualized, and it varies hugely. Someone like Jacob Holleran would be running, way more than some of the other guys. Someone like a James Cromack, who even when he's healthy, doesn't do a ton of volume. So that some of the guys on the long run day we're going over 2 hours. By some of them, I think I probably only mean Jacob. Mike Rogers early in the season would have been in that range as well. And then there would be, the majority of them would be in that 90 to 100-minute range, and then there'd be some that might be even a little shorter than that. But and then easy runs, most of them would have been doubling, but some, I know Hudson was he's in the pool in the morning and then running in the evening. Towards the end of the season, he was in the pool for both of those sessions, which we'll touch on a little bit. But so those easy runs and long run days are super individualized. So getting right into it, August 26th to September 1st, first microcycle of the first mesocycle. Right off the bat, I think the last slide said that we were training Tuesday, Thursday. Right off the bat, we went on a Wednesday instead of a Tuesday because that was what made sense. We drove up to our training camp on the Tuesday, did an easy shakeout, and then just did the workout Wednesday so that we weren't getting off the bus and jumping right into a quality session. What you'll notice about this first mesocycle is that we did nothing in distances. The reason for that is because for the most part, I like to transition from fartleks into intervals because in theory, these guys shouldn't be sharp enough to really be knocking off fast intervals. And we also don't necessarily want them to start racing each other and being too caught up in how fast they're running in these first 3 weeks. We just want to get solid work in. So, you'll notice for the first mesocycle, the first 3 microcycles, it's all fartleks and just sort of extended efforts. Nothing measured. So Wednesday was 10 by 2 minutes up, 60 seconds down. So fartlek is literally just it just means speed play. So you're speeding up and slowing down. There's not rest where you actually stop running. You're moving the whole time. So it's just 10 sets of 2 minutes up. The ups were at 8K effort, and then the 60 seconds down were at threshold. The way we define threshold is basically how fast you could run if you were racing for an hour. It's right around half marathon pace, maybe a little. Well, it's a little bit quicker than half marathon pace for most of these guys, but for all of these guys, we don't have any 60-minute half marathoners. But it's right in that lactate threshold range. So If they weren't doing the longer stuff, if they weren't doing the faster stuff, when you're at your threshold pace, you are clearing lactate at the same rate that you're producing it, so you're never feeling that accumulation of lactate. The reason I like to throw a bunch of recovery in at threshold pace is because later in the year when we're racing, uh, most of these guys are not able to really keep their foot on the gas for a full 10K. They can do it for 8K, but up until this coming year, our national championship and even our conference championship has been 10K. And we want them being able to recover, bring their heart rate down a little bit, regroup, refocus at threshold. And if we can get that threshold pace to be a little bit quicker than it is at the start of the season, if they find themselves, you come off a hill or you're turning with the wind at your back and you've got a little bit of a period of time where you can, as I said, just regroup and refocus, and you have to revert back to threshold, we want that pace to be as fast as possible, and we also want that athlete to be as efficient as possible, just locking into that, bringing the heart rate down a little bit, and then gearing and spiking back up. And the Saturday was just a pure threshold session. It was just 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes with 90 seconds rest. Just some notes. These are just directly from what I had written down afterwards. Hudson and John are ahead of expectations. John was coming off of an extended downtime after his outdoor season. He PB'd in the 800, I think, at the end of June, and then we actually shut down at that point. And he was just doing some easy runs, so we weren't expecting him to look as good as he did that day, and we definitely weren't expecting Hudson to look as good as he was because he got injured middle of May, and we shut his season down at that point. And this was maybe 10 days back into his training, and he looked phenomenal. And then Will is the real deal. Will Cox. It was my first workout where I really got to watch the new guys, the rookies. And Will really stood out literally on day one. That this guy's going to contribute in cross country in his first year. And I think for the first even 6 weeks of the season, he looked like he was probably our top guy. So that was pretty cool to see. Same Mesocycle, Microcycle 2, Wednesday, 7 by 3 minutes up, 60 seconds down, same paces, literally just bringing the fast reps, making them a minute longer. There's fewer reps, but we're just extending our fast running and keeping our recovery the same and at the same pace. Just sort of locking in on what 8K effort is for a couple weeks down the road when we start really doing intervals at that pace and then racing at that pace. Same workout on the Sunday. We didn't go Saturday. We did a long run Saturday. We had a meet scheduled that Sunday in Halifax, but that was actually the day of Hurricane Dorian, so that got canceled. So we did this workout on the roads, on terminal roads. So paces were probably a little bit quicker than they would have been if we did them on our normal threshold loops in trails in the park. But obviously we weren't able to access the park for a little bit at that point. Notes here. Some of these are pretty important. Jacob and Nick were rolling in the back half of the fartlek, so right away we started seeing Nick Robertson start showing the potential that it turns out that he has. That just Alec with some exclamation marks and question marks. He's, as I mentioned earlier, he's been as far down our roster as 14 or 15 on some teams that we'll just say they weren't super deep. So to see him, I think he was a couple meters back of Jacob and Nick on this one, and to see him mixing it up with some of the guys he was really showed like the commitment level and the work that he had done this summer, and it also showed like what he was going to contribute to the team was, he's going to get those guys going, right? Like there's, if the back of the pack starts moving, the middle of the pack's going to start moving, and that's going to put some pressure on the front, and that's what Alec was doing for us in those first few workouts. So that was awesome. And then trust Jacob. This one was basically a note to myself. Early in the workout, I think for sure John, Hudson, Will, and Callum would have started just rolling early and started gapping everybody. And I would have got on Jacob pretty early in that workout to close that gap and to stop screwing around. Only to find out that those guys went out too hot. Jacob was right. Him and Nick were bang on, and they actually started rolling those guys up towards the end of the workout. And that happened a few times this year. And I just had to keep reminding myself, Jacob knows himself. He knows the pace. He knows how to do this. So just lay off him and trust him. Final microcycle of that first mesocycle was, again, very, very similar. Same amount of volume. 5 by 4 minutes up, 60 seconds down, same paces, but now we're looking at 4 minutes at a time at that fast pace. So a little bit more challenging. We actually saw a few guys start to crack towards the end of that session, and then 2 by 20 minutes threshold with 2 minutes rest. So same amount of volume as when we did 10, 20, 10, but in fewer reps, which makes the workout a little bit more challenging and makes it way more important for you to actually lock in on your true threshold pace and not try to impress the coaches early in the season. We make it very clear we're not picking the team in September, or the top 7. We're not. You're not going to impress me on a threshold workout. We're literally just there to get work done. I barely even watch the threshold workouts on Saturday. I mostly just sit around talking with the other coaches about what we're going to do next week. And then notes, here come the colds. It was a little earlier this year than normal, but it makes sense. We actually had more people in residence than we typically do, and the res kids usually are the first ones to get that fall cold, and then it just sort of makes its way through the team, and this was the first one. Will Cox was the first one to get sick, and Will being sick, as it was a real theme of the cross country season, but he got hit pretty hard by this one. So now we're into the second mesocycle. First microcycle of that mesocycle ended with a race at St. FX. We did treat that race as a workout, as basically every team did. Even late September is pretty early to be going to the well in a cross country season that's got to extend basically to Halloween and sometimes 2 weeks later than that. So on the Tuesday, we did 12 by a K. Some of the rookies may have done 10. And even one of the workouts last week and the week before with the 4-minute reps, we may have had some of the rookies do one fewer. But we were just alternating pace. This is our first workout where it was measured. We would have done this at Goresbrook. It's a nice grassy loop. Pretty, there's some rolling hills, some steep hills, some weird footing. So we don't necessarily look for fast times on this course, but it's very good to prepare for some of the harder grass courses that we were going to see later in the season. So it's 12 by a K, alternating between 8K effort and threshold with 60 seconds rest. So really it's 6 by a K at 8K effort. So it's a much easier workout than it looks like when you look at it on paper and say, oh, we're doing 12 by a K here. But those threshold ones, again, it's just to practice recovering and being relaxed at threshold pace. So for those front end guys, the fast ones may have gotten down into the 306 to 310 range, and the threshold ones would have been sort of 325 in that range at the front. So they weren't moving super fast, but they were getting work done, which was the whole point. So Saturday we showed up at X. We raced in trainers. We don't race in spikes or flats early in the season. We run in what we would be running in at home if we were just doing a practice. The goal was to run the first half just slightly faster than our threshold, basically tempo in the first half, and then as you start to feel a little bit better, start progressing and start rolling some guys up as the race goes. Um, the guys looked sluggish. You could tell that maybe a few of them had gone a little harder on Tuesday than was prescribed. Could also see, Will was very sick at this point. Actually, in hindsight, I probably made a mistake by letting him race, but um, that's part of why we do these season reviews. Is we want to look back and see what we could have done better. It's not just all about what the athletes could have done better. We did show our depth, though. We had some guys stepping up and some guys stepping down, and we were still able to win the meet, which was pretty cool. Daniel Rosen was awesome. Jacob Holleran was our third guy, which was probably a surprise to everyone except for him. It was, and we had some of our top guys a little bit further down the pack than we would have liked to have seen, but it was nice to see that depth was winning meets, just like we had expected. Some notes that I had written for myself. How many more times can Jacob replicate that effort? That guy goes to the twilight zone every time he races, and it's still tough for me to wrap my head around how many times he can go to the well and somehow be recovered enough to do it again later. Anyone else on our team puts themselves in the amount of discomfort that he does every day. If they do that once, they're going to need a few days to recover from it. So, I came back from that meet, and I was excited to see the way Jacob was running, but I was also a little concerned that maybe we went a little too deep, a little too early. But so that was the question I wanted to ask myself. There was how many more times can Jacob do this? And what we won that race by 2 over Saint FX. And really all I couldn't get out of my head that what we did that day was not enough to get it done at a conference championship. When it says here when Durhak gets going, that's Addison Durhak, one of the Saint FX runners who has just killed us year after year at AUs. He tends to start. He starts far enough back in the Saint FX pack that there have been years where I've wondered if he was still on the team, and then had to go looking back through the results. And then by the time the AUS Championships comes around, he's beating our third guy. Some good solid guys have been beaten by Addison in championship races. So we weren't going to. I wasn't going to let him sneak up on us again, and I wanted to be very clear with everybody. When he gets going, the effort that we put forward at the Saint FX meet was a silver medal effort. So here are our race results. I won't go through all of them, but what I will say is at the bottom there, you'll see our 1-7 spread was 54 seconds, which was, we were happy with it considering who we had in there. You'll see Callum was back in 19th, and Mike was back in 27th. Those guys are normally, I think that was probably the first time Jacob beat either one of those guys in a cross country race. So, when those guys are where they're supposed to be, we knew that spread was going to tighten up a little bit. We just, 2 fifth-year guys, we had to be confident that they were really going to get it going when they needed to. And then, as I said, Will was pretty sick and didn't race the way he had been training, and that probably affected our spread as well. So second microcycle of the second mesocycle. There was a serious attitude shift going into this week. Going into that Tuesday, I had made it very clear, like, things are going to change now. We're going to do things in practice that are going to feel harder, more challenging than some races. And we were going to be working on that mental toughness piece that we talked about earlier. And the only way to do that is to hit them with it in training. So what we did on Tuesday was pretty unique for us. We don't do this kind of thing very often, but So it's just a ladder is 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute, with the rest being half of the preceding rep. So after the 1 minute, it's 30 seconds. After 3 minutes, it's 90 seconds, and etc. What was unique about that workout was that it says there in the notes that the workout was blind. We I took all of their watches. I didn't tell anybody what the workout was. Their instructions were, when I blow the whistle, you start running your 8K race pace. And when I blow the whistle again, you stop and you jog. And it just continues. The whistle to start, whistle to stop. That's all the information they got. What I wanted them to do that day was really try to focus in on the moment and start answering some of those big questions that you have when you start doubting yourself and you start having a little bit of fear in races. When you know how much longer in the rep you have left, it makes it a lot easier to either cop out and say, well, I know I can't do this for 4 more minutes, so I have to back off, and you start panicking a little bit. Or, well, I know, I'm 30 seconds away from the finish line. I can put in a little surge here and maybe make this rep look a little better than I'm actually feeling. What I wanted to see them do, which they all did quite well, was ask themselves the question, at this very moment, not knowing how much running I have left, not even knowing how fast I'm actually going, because they had no information. They were getting absolutely no feedback. I had instructed our coaches not even to encourage them. We just stood silently on the hill while I blew the whistles. To ask themselves, do I need to stop right now, or do I need to slow down right now? And to, no matter how many times they ask themselves that question, to answer it with a no. No, I'm okay. I promised them, I assured them, every single one of you can do this workout. This is not a trick. We're not trying to trick you here. This is a very doable workout. You just have to trust yourself. You have to trust me, and you have to just do it. And when you start having those nagging doubts, acknowledge them, answer the question, and just get it done. So that was what the goal was that day. It was pretty fun. You could some of them were a bit more excited about it than others, but everybody responded super well. Jacob was sick. Unfortunately for him, he didn't get to do this workout because it would have been super fun for him. That said, of everybody on the team, he's the guy who needed it the least. So it wasn't. If there are certain guys on our team that if they were unavailable for that workout, we probably would have actually switched it with Saturday to make sure they got it in, but definitely wasn't worth doing that for Jacob. I wrote down Hudson's making them suffer. Hudson was not screwing around that day. He did a fair amount of leading. I mean, they all took turns leading, but when Hudson was leading, he would make a beeline for the biggest hill on the course, which is a big hill, and he would just take the team just straight up it. I didn't give them any instructions on where to run. They were supposed to make that call themselves, and you could just see Hudson would go to the front, and he would just turn the entire group straight up a hill. So that was pretty cool to see. I think he hit it 3 times. So it was. He took a workout that was supposed to be mentally demanding and made it more mentally demanding, which that's the kind of guy he is, and I think I don't think anybody was super pumped about it at the time, but it definitely made us better. Saturday was 3x2 miles with 4 minutes rest. It's actually closer to 3x3K. We have a loop at the park that we call the 2 mile loop. That's clearly not 2 miles. It was measured out long before before GPS watches, so it's between 3K and 2 miles, but I think it's probably a little closer to 3K. 4 minutes rest. First one's at threshold. Second one was at race pace, and the third one was supposed to be faster than race pace. This one did not go quite as well as Tuesday. Jacob was still sick. I don't even think he finished the workout. John was very sick. John when John gets sick or when John gets injured, it's never a small deal. John tends to joke about his strategic weeks off because every season that I've coached him, he's either gotten sick or rolled an ankle or something where he had to take a week completely off, and he usually comes back from them a little bit better than he was going in. Uh, but this was sort of the day that we noticed, okay, John's in trouble too. He got dropped hard, and then I ended up having to drive Hudson home because his foot was acting up again. Which from that day on, Hudson's foot was we were addressing it daily. I think he was getting treatment 3 times a week. He For the next few weeks after this, he was only doing workouts. His easy days were all in the pool or on a bike. We did that for a few weeks, and then he started running again. But Hudson's foot just became a theme of the whole season. Um, I mean, there were some guys. Will Cox looked really good this day. There were some guys that really put it together, but as a whole, this Saturday was not what we were hoping it was. That's a workout that we do every year, and we like to try to compare it year on year. And I didn't even look at the comparisons when I got home because we knew that Saturday was not the session we were anticipating. So this is the third micro of the second meso, so we're really into it now. That Tuesday we ended up just doing 2x15 threshold with 2 minutes. I was looking back through my planning notes for that week, and that was supposed to be a very challenging overspeed workout. The workout that I had scripted on the Monday morning, was we were going to do 7 by a K fast. I wanted them under 3 minutes for most of them. We were going to take 3 to 4 minutes rest. Like, we were going to really go to the well that day. Then their surveys started coming in on how they were feeling. As I said, Hudson's foot was bothering him. John was sick. Jacob was still recovering. I think Daniel Rosen was starting to get sick. It was making its way through residence. I think eventually there was 4 or 5 of the guys on our team live in a house, and I think all of them except for Hudson ended up getting it. Mike definitely got it. Callum was sick at one point. So I figured there's no point. They're buried right now. There's no point digging even deeper. So let's just give them an easy threshold workout and come back on Saturday. On that Saturday, we did 1K, 2K, 1K, 2K, 1K at 8K effort with 2 minutes rest. This was still at Goresbrook. We've done this workout at Goresbrook before, and we've done it at the park. The loops that we like to use were still not available at the park after the hurricane, so we were at Goresbrook, which was great. We want to get on grass as often as possible. The workout was solid. Everyone looked pretty good except for John, who was still coming back from his cold. As I said, it takes John a long time to recover from things. Hudson, I think that was the day that we really learned that he can't wear spikes or flats. We were going to put him on. At that point, we made the call: you're going to wear your spikes at AUs and U Sports, and that's it. He didn't race in them again. He didn't train in them again. He was just in his big clunkers. So he had a couple reps where he was off the back a little bit, feeling sorry for himself, but you could see. I mean, I think Evan actually chatted with him quickly going into one of the reps, and you could just see he snapped back into it and got back to the front. So that was cool to see. And we've got Robertson is learning how to try. That's just, again, a note for myself. Nick, as I said, he was from PEI. He'd run 8:58 for 3K and had been UPEI's top guy the year before. But I don't think he had seen a ton of competition in his career, and sort of, he was maxing out at an 8 out of 10 and was still running with our guys, and you could just tell he was way more comfortable than the guys he was running with. So at around this time, we just started harping on him, like, you need to be running with guys, with that top group. You need to be running with Will. You need to be running with Hudson. You need to be running with John. These or Callum. You're good enough. And I don't actually think confidence was a huge issue for him. I think the issue was a lack of understanding of how much it's supposed to hurt. But to his credit, when we tell him to do something, he just does it. And it was pretty funny because we, as a coaching staff, we were joking about it. That, like, we the magic in Nick Robertson was literally just telling him to try, and it just clicked. Just one day, he was like, "Okay, I'll just be our fastest runner." So that was pretty cool. And then 5 guys raced. This was the Acadia race. Um, I will never run our top squad on back-to-back weekends in the cross country season, uh, unless there was ever a situation where meets became mandatory. If the schedule became mandatory the same way it is for basketball or soccer, or some of the team sports. Um, if that doesn't happen, if we don't have to be there, we're not going to be there on back-to-back weekends. And we were a week out from the Interlock race, which is one of the more important races of our season. So uh, we we knew we wanted to have a scoring team there to support Acadia and to support their meet and the effort that they put into hosting. But we also know that we're not going to race hard back-to-back weekends in the cross country season. So we sent we were going to send the bottom 5 guys from St. FX so that we could have a scoring team. We sent 4 of the bottom 5 guys from St. FX, and we sent Aiden Goslet instead of Callum, because Callum really needed to get that workout in. And as I mentioned, Callum is one of our top 3 guys when he's on, and we needed to get him on. And racing at Acadia was not going to be the way to do that. It's probably the hardest course in the conference. It's an awesome course. Ralph Williams has done a great job of setting that up. But again, we're not interested in racing back-to-back weekends. So we sent 5, and those 5, the results are here. And it was actually, the 1-5 spread was a minute 47, which was not awesome. But Mike, Alec, and Aiden basically all crossed the line together. It was pretty exciting. And you can start to see Mike starting to respond. About a week earlier, we had cut his volume basically in half. He did a ton of running in the summer. And then we kept the foot on the gas through the start of the cross country season. And the way Mike operates at his best is when we just overload him with volume. We just do a ton to the point that he's exhausted and he's just slogging through workouts. And as soon as we start seeing him basically hit rock bottom, we cut everything. We bring the easy runs down to 30, 40 minutes, and we start sharpening up in workouts. And he usually is able to respond and get back to where he needs to be. So, being our top guy at Acadia was a pretty big step for him, and I think set him up well for the next week. So now we're into our final mesocycle. So we're 3 weeks out from our conference championship. We decided to work out on Wednesday of that week to give him a little bit more recovery after that tough one on Saturday. This one was a 30-minute progressive run. What I had wanted was for them to start maybe a little bit slower than threshold or right at threshold, and just sort of cut down as the workout went, so that when they finished, they were 3K to 5K effort, and then just some 400-meter strides afterwards with the race on Saturday. Wednesday's workout looked terrible for most of the guys. I think I don't know who was responsible. I've got some theories, but it was, I think they went out at the right pace, and then the first progression was just way too fast, and there was just nowhere to go from there, and it just sort of imploded at that point. I think even Callum Callum didn't even finish that workout. And when I asked him afterwards, I thought he may have rolled his ankle or something. I asked him how what happened. He was like, we weren't progressing. We were regressing. I mean, there's no point of doing a run where the effort increases but the pace decreases because you're just going to bury yourself. Race was mediocre, but likely reflected the 12-hour bus ride the day before. We drove to Montreal on the Friday and raced on Saturday. We just drove straight there. So obviously the legs were feeling it there. Callum, Mike, Will, and Nick looked pretty good in the race. They were coming along. Mike and Callum sort of redeemed themselves from earlier in the year. They ran their way into the top 7 because we chose our top 7 after this race. John still did not look 100% healthy. I had told him, Will, and Nick to sort of roll the dice and try to get out fast and see what happens. And when the wheels fell off, they fell off hard and they fell off fast. And that's not super typical of John. So I think we were still looking at some lingering effects of that cold. And here are our interlock results. So the actual results are first, and then in brackets there are the AUS results. This is without UNB there. Memorial wasn't there. I think that's pretty much it for the top teams, but those two teams were not there, and St. FX didn't have Addison Durhack there. He actually raced at UPEI that weekend. So we had our spread where we wanted it, which is very important. 27 seconds from 1 to 7 is huge. But the way I was looking at it, and I think the way the rest of the team was looking at it, and I talked to Hudson and Jacob about it afterwards. The spread was right, but the entire group just needed to be better if we were going to get it done 2 weeks later. X actually beat us this day. We were 4th, they were 3rd, and then our AUS result was 2nd. They ran super well, we weren't terrible. We just we knew that sort of mid-20s 1 to 7 spread was right, but that whole group needed to be in the right spot. And as it was, St. FX's 3rd runner was racing our first guy. So there's no scenario where that is going to be have a great ending for us. But the way this race went really allowed us to lock in on what our race plan was going to be for AUs. We really got to look at what the top guys in our conference were doing. Paul McClellan at St. FX. I'm not the fastest learner in the world, and the last few years we've built race plans around sending guys out with him and trying to crack them. And I think in his entire time at St. FX, the only we maybe had 1 or 2 guys ever beat him in a cross country race, and one of those guys was a transfer from St. FX, so we can't really count him. And Matt McNeil's 5th year may have been Paul's first year, and he would have beat him. But Paul, I call him a tiger killer. He just every year he just one at a time breaks our entire team down, and the way he ran at Interlock, we were able to take a step back as a group and say, we're not going to try to throw anything at Paul. We're gonna try to get our 7th guy ahead of their 3rd or 4th, knowing that we don't have anyone that can run with Paul, and actually Jacob Benoit either. Their rookie who was running lights out as well. So it wasn't the result we were looking for, but the spread was finally where we thought it needed to be in order for us to get it done. So now we're into the 2nd microcycle of our last mesocycle. So we're 14 days out. We bust home. So we drove all day Friday, we raced Saturday, and then we got right back on the bus and drove overnight and got back Sunday night, or Sunday morning. Gave them Sunday off. They didn't do a long run that day, and then we didn't train again until Thursday. Like they did their easy runs, and some strides on Tuesday, but we didn't do another quality session until the Thursday, where we did 3x3 by a K, uh, with 2 minutes between reps and 5 minutes between sets. First set was threshold, second set was 8K effort, and the third set was 5K effort. We just wanted them to really get after it and run some fast Ks and start feeling pretty good about get the legs spinning. And then Saturday we were at the track at Beasley. We did 4 by a mile at 8K effort, on 2 minutes rest, and then 4 by 150-meter strides. Again, just to get them feeling excited and get them feeling a little snappy. We lost light on Thursday, so we actually had to change the loop up a little bit to make sure that nobody was tripping in the dark. Just get away from the roots and uneven ground and stuff. So we weren't actually able to see the progression that we wanted, or to be able to confirm the progression that we wanted. But the guys looked awesome. There was at one point Hudson just dropped a low 250s K, and the whole team just went with him. And it was similar on Saturday. Callum put a little bit of a gap on everybody, but everybody was running. They were struggling to run as slow as 5-minute miles that day. They really wanted to run faster, but I didn't want them to. I didn't want them to get on a track, get excited about it, and just their calves would be shot. So I think I sent a text out to the group right after that Saturday workout that we're finally starting to look like a team that could win a conference championship. It was, we're well into October at this point, and it was the first time all year that as a team we looked very good. So, the timing seemed to be right. No notes on this one, just that last microcycle. On Wednesday we did 4 by 100-meter starts, and then just that last start we just kept going into a 2K at race pace. Everyone still looked good. We try not to overthink what that last workout looks like, because it is what it is. But everybody did look pretty solid. I actually think Jacob may have gone over on his ankle that day, and we were maybe a little concerned that we weren't going to have him going. But we were also very confident in Daniel Rosen and Aiden Goslett, our 8-9, that whoever we had to put in, we were going to be just as good. But I checked in with him the next day. He said he was fine. I think on the Friday he told me that I was worrying about it more than him. So I tried to stop worrying about it. And then Saturday was the U.S. Championships. So here are the results from that meet. We did manage to win. The guys ran just ridiculously well as a group. We were 23 seconds from 1 to 7. We had 7 in the top 14, without anyone in the top 5, as we expected. St. Mary's, UNB, and Memorial and St. FX all put their top runners ahead of our first. But then we just piled everybody in a row, and when there's only 23 seconds between your first and your 7th, there's just not a whole lot that a team can do to break that group up. So we, it took us a little while took me a little while to do the math. Most of the athletes knew and were wondering why I wasn't sure, but that's just because I'm not very good at math. But yeah, they were able to get it done. This was something that I was able to look at, the next day. Obviously you can't compare times from cross country courses. Courses are different, and you're not necessarily running for time. But the Interlock course and the AUS course, very similar surfaces, same distance, very similar courses in general. And when you actually look at the AUS results from the rest of our conference versus what they did at Interlock, for the most part, people ran similar times. Ran Andrew Peveril, the guy who won AU's from St. Mary's. I think he was like 2 or 3 seconds faster at Interlock than he was at AU's, like basically a similar time. Paul McClellan was second at AU's, and he ran a very similar time at AU's as he did to Interlock. So, people for the most part were running about the same time at AU's as they were at Interlock. Our guys, really showed the way they stepped up and the way they peaked. Uh, John was 35 seconds faster at AU's. Hudson was 34 seconds faster. Callum was 23 seconds faster. Nick was 4. Mike was 20. Jacob was 1, and Will was actually the only guy on our team who was slower at AU's than he was at Interlock. It was only by a second, and believe it or not, Will was sick again. So, as a full team, we were a minute and 56 seconds faster at our conference championship than we were 2 weeks earlier. We averaged 16 and a half seconds faster at AU's than we did at Interlock. So we were pretty happy with the result. I don't know if we could have scripted it better. The guys had a plan. They bought in and they got it done. And it was just super fun to watch. So just some reflections, some of the good stuff. Just like we suspected in August, depth is the most important thing in our sport. We were able to beat teams that put 2 guys ahead of our first guy. Depth is so important in cross country, especially if you have depth all the way down to 7. And in our case, we had depth all the way down to 9. Knowing, it affects the entire season. Not only does it affect the result of the race, but it allows you to train a little bit harder, knowing that you've got enough bodies that if somebody is injured, James Cromack didn't race for us all year. He was our top guy the year before. He's still probably our best cross country runner. If we knew we had to have him in, we may have trained a little bit differently. We may have been a little bit more cautious, and we're not cracking eggs just for the fun of it. But when you have that depth, it gives you a little bit more wiggle room to roll the dice and ride that line a little bit, which it's pretty important in our sport, especially cross country and road running, where in the longer distances, if you're not running some serious volume, then A, you better be pretty talented if you want to be competitive, and B, if you're not running good volume, you're not going to maximize your ability in the sport. It's just I have yet to see a good argument that you can train for a running event without running, or without running a lot. Anybody who's heard me at coaching courses, I'm a big proponent of the lowest effective dose. So, at the least amount of running that a person can do to maximize their fitness. But that's still a ton of work. I've yet to meet anybody who can maximize their fitness while running 60 kilometers a week. It just doesn't work. From a coaching perspective, I felt like we peaked people very well. There's a bit of luck in that as well. I'm not gonna sit here and take credit for 6 guys showing up and having the best race of their year on the same day. They did it, but the way we planned for the season, the way it sort of progressed, it did go to plan, which is always nice. Seniors stepped up in their final championship. Callum was our 3rd guy. Mike was our 5th guy. Neither one of them were close to that in early September, so it was just nice to see those 2 get a win in their 5th years while both scoring. Egos were checked early and often. This was probably I've been head coach for 8 years now. This year was the least amount of ego management that I've ever done, both on the men's and women's side. It was super fun to work with this group. There was very little just managing those types of personalities. So it was awesome. And buy-in was off the charts, right? They were fully bought into what we were trying to do, to the point that my athletic director was at the meet and he mentioned it afterwards that he had noticed that the John Hudsons and Callums of our team at no point in that race tried to mix it up with the three individual medalists, knowing that we were valuing that team title over anything. By no means am I saying any one of those guys were ready to run with Paul or Jacob, who were second and third that day. But it was a conscious decision. We're going to let the front of this group go, and we're going to run within ourselves, and we're going to take control of that sort of 6 to 14 range of the race, and make sure that we get it done. Not so goods. Depth is meaningless if too far back. We learned that at Interlock, and just sort of running the numbers is what if we ran the way we did at Interlock at AU's, what that was going to give to us, and we saw it really happen at the national level when we got to U Sports. The guys ran well at U Sports. They actually ran very similarly there to the way they did at AU's, with a couple of exceptions, for two reasons. I mean, Mike had been tapering for a month at that point, and had probably just started to detrain a little bit and was just not ready to have another good one. And Callum rolled the dice, which I encouraged, and I'm happy he did. But he went out in the top 15 and just wasn't quite there. But other than that, our top 5 guys in that race ran quite well, and our spread was really good. We had everybody running together, but we were just too far back. We said all year, if we've got a 23 or if we've got a 25-second spread from 1 to 7, and our first guy is in 40th, we're possibly a top 8 team in the country. If we've got a 25-second spread and our top guy is 70th, we're probably somewhere between 10 and 15, and that's what happened. We were 13th, right? So, we just need to, if we want to be nationally competitive, we need to be better. We just need we need to run the way we've been running. It just needs to be faster, right? So we've got to figure out how to crack that, which is that's a major challenge as a coach, where when you're just watching a race and you just realize we're just not good enough. But most of those guys are back next year, and we'll be ready to go. From on a personal note, and a lot of these reflections need to be about what we as coaches can do better. I need to be able to control my emotions after races. That was actually a piece of feedback that I got from Al Yar a couple days after AU's. We had just won the women's title, which I really wasn't expecting to happen, and we'll touch on that when we go through the women's season. But I was pretty shaken up after the men's race. I was struggling to do the math. I was telling people that I wasn't sure if we had won. I thought we had lost by 1. The right thing to do, as Al rightfully pointed out, would have been to take a step away from the group, try to figure out what actually happened, or even better, just wait for the results. They're going to come out and they're going to be right. And I think I put undue stress on the men's team after the men's race by not having my emotions in check, and that's never a great idea when you're supposed to be the even keeled sort of pillar for them. They crossed the line, and I was all over the place, and that there's no way that was good for them, and I'm 100% sure they all noticed. So, we laugh about it now, but it was very good feedback to get from an assistant coach. To be nationally competitive, we can only peak once. We've got to be able to, if we're going to be, call it top 8 at U Sports, unless our conference changes drastically, we're going to have to be able to be competitive there without the hard taper that we had, which obviously we weren't able to do this year, which makes sense. I mean, the team that Eric has built at St. FX, and with Bernie as well, they're very good, and they're very good at cross country. And so we had to be we basically have to choose one championship meet to really ramp up for, and and we chose AU's because we had to be we basically had to be perfect to get it done, or pretty close to perfect. Um, but if a team in our either the entire conference can improve, or if any of us, either us, St. FX, UMB, for any of our teams to be competitive nationally, I believe we're going to have to do it by training through AUs. Again, whether that's us or another school. And we need bodies. We need bodies to run with. You know, AUs was competitive. It was fun. There's a lot of good runners, but it's such a small meet. It just happens every year. You saw it happen to us. You saw it happen to St. FX, both men's and women's for both teams. Um, it's when you get to the U Sports Championships and there's just that many good people, it's a completely different sport. And we've got to be more prepared for that than we were this year. And that's a coaching issue as well too, right? So I need to figure out what we can do next year, uh, to get us into the right scenarios, uh, where where that shock of having all those bodies around happens weeks before the U Sports Championships rather than at our national championship. And then 1 to 2 low sticks are necessary. You can't be nationally competitive, uh, with just depth. Um, I think that we had 7 very good fourth or fifth runners this year, and we're going to need 1 or 2 guys who are true low sticks if we're going to be competitive. And maybe what that looks like, and we were being forced into that right now, but we may need to devalue the outdoor track season for some of our guys who are more cross country oriented. I'm thinking Nick Robertson's, James Cromack, um, maybe Will Cox, like that group of guys. We're going to need 1 or 2 of them to come out of this summer significantly ahead of where they were last year, if we're going to be ready to compete with some of the top teams in the country. Some other keys for next year: Will Cox, Daniel Rosen, and Aiden Goslett. They were huge for us this year, and we just need them to progress the way first years do progress into second year. If we get one more big step from those 3, I think we'll be in a really, really good spot. Same thing with Nick Robertson. Um, can Robertson take the next step? I mentioned earlier he had run 8:58 for 3K coming in. He ran 8:39 this indoor season. His improvement trajectory has been crazy. I think it's probably going to keep going. I think that this kid's his natural ability is so high that we may see some pretty special stuff from him this year, and that could be a key, a turning point for our team next year. It's not. I didn't write it down, but we got to figure out how to keep James Cromack healthy. When he's on, he's very on, and he helps us a ton. So I have to find a way to program individually for him so that he's ready to rock when we need him to be. And then, as I said, get into some bigger races. And then this part is not just unique to us; it's for everybody. We are all struggling right now with how we're going to build for the cross country season with no outdoor season, because I think it's safe to say that we're not going to be getting an outdoor season this year. No access to trails and no access to training partners, right? So we're sending workouts out, but everything's on pavement. Everything is in their neighborhood, as we've been asked to do, and everything is solo. So there are some unique challenges for this year, but I think we'll be fine. Yeah, hopefully this is a new type of PD that I wanted to try to provide. Hopefully it was something that's interesting or eye opening or something for somebody. As I mentioned, I think it's important for us as coach educators to to not only talk about our processes, but to actually to show the nuts and bolts and the actual workouts that we do. So the purpose of this wasn't to say, well, look, we made this plan and it worked, because I'd say significantly greater than 50% of the plans I've made have not worked. This just happens to be one of them that did. Uh, what I wanted to do though was to share the day in and day out work that we're prescribing, that these guys are doing, uh, and some of the thought processes that go into why we made those specific workout selections. So same thing as last week. If you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to either myself or to Jonathan Doucette, who will forward them along. If you've got any suggestions of what you'd like to see in these sort of weekly presentations, I'm more than happy to take some suggestions and build some presentations based on that. And again, any specific questions, let me know. But thanks.